Look straight at the truth. Your birth certificate wasn't stamped in familiar lands like Mexico or Colombia, like in those worn-out documentaries. You were born in a fortified villa, hidden deep in the mountains of the Golden Triangle. No bank mortgages, no overdue utility bills. The surname you carried on paper wasn't just a label, it meant absolute power. From the moment your first cry echoed, you were already listed as the owner of assets surpassing the GDP of several small countries. But this wasn't a privilege. It was a lifelong employment contract you were forced to sign before you even learned to read. Your father wasn't a diligent office worker punching the clock. He was a machine, running the deadliest supply chain on the planet. At home, he was like a ghost, leaving behind only the stench of scorched cigars mixed with gunpowder and stacks of worn, stained US bills scattered in a corner of the hall. In your early years, you brought home A-grade tests. You tried to draw family portraits. But this machine didn't operate on feelings or family values. His reaction was always a cold, analytical gaze, silent, almost terrifying. He wasn't seeing a son. He was auditing a subordinate, searching for a ruthless gene, but the report returned the image of a meek little lamb, obediently following the rules. By instinct, that cold rejection didn't tear you apart or cause anguish. The concept of soul erosion had no place in this world. Your nervous system simply rewired itself. It registered the failure of your useless crayon drawings. You didn't resent, nor did you search for moral lessons. You began to observe the dry administrative rules of the organization. You stared at the dark, dried blood, hastily cleaned, on the living room tile floor. No panic, no emotional outburst. The brain instantly encoded it as the inevitable operating costs of the business. Around you lingered only a silent, stalking paranoia, a repeated, wordless message. If you cannot prove your utility, the system will discard you. You weren't a corrupted human being. You were patiently waiting for the first assignment document to prove yourself as a perfect cog, flawlessly meshing with the ruthless machinery of the family. And that bloody test of competence was scheduled by him on your 14th birthday. Rank 1. The alternate heir, childhood phase. The countdown to your 15th birthday, the milestone postponed by the organization to evaluate your final competency test, was anything but childhood. It was an unpaid internship with no instruction manual, under the scrutiny of security cameras and the vacant stares of bodyguards. You were the alternate heir. A title that sounds glittering but, in reality, marked you as inventory awaiting quality assessment by the system. In the underground world, money flowed through sweat-soaked IOUs and barrels of lifeless chemicals. There was no space for non-commercial value. You submitted performance reports in the form of perfect score math tests. You tried to standardize family drawings into some kind of emotional KPI, hoping your superior called father would approve. But the organization's accounting system did not accept transactions in this currency. Every time he returned from a shady border deal in Chiang Mai, carrying the stench of gunpowder and an unsettling silence, you stood there. The report in your hands became absurd. He didn't yell. He didn't hit. Physical abuse was an unnecessary risk cost for a CEO. Instead, he wielded a far crueler administrative power. Absolute disregard. His eyes swept over you like they were scanning a worthless piece of furniture in the waiting hall. A lightning-fast personnel evaluation. Not sharp enough. Not lethal enough. Not profitable. You didn't cry. The concepts of injury or emotion were luxury goods forbidden in this house. His feedback didn't gnaw at or corrode your soul. Your nervous system simply activated an optimization process. You recorded the data. Kindness categorized as bad debt. Obedience marked as a losing investment. You began learning the first code of the underground. Survival through silence. Never question the trucks moving empty at 3 a.m. Never wonder about the mud and hardened red-brown streaks someone hastily scrubbed under dim yellow lights in the unmonitored parking lot. Silent paranoia gradually replaced natural breath. You began monitoring and doubting, even the servants. A knock delivering breakfast made your muscles contract, your brain instantly calculating a potential internal purge scenario. The organization was silently training you through fear. They didn't need a child. They needed a tool to execute commands without delay. Repeated rejection was sharpening you into a cold administrative blade. The only way to gain access to the heart of this machine wasn't to be obedient, it was to synchronize completely with its ruthlessness. Your personnel file remained in limbo until the midnight bell of your 15th birthday officially rang. The first practical test had already been prepared in the soundproof basement. Rank 2. The bloodied intern. The end of the observation period pulled you away from the silent red-carpeted hallways and straight down into a soundproof, unventilated concrete basement. The torch ceremony of the underworld had no candles. Beneath the dim yellow glow of a dust-covered incandescent bulb, your 15th birthday gift was waiting. A man was tied and bent over a metal chair. Blood, dark and congealed, trickled from the corner of his mouth down his chin. This was a subordinate who had violated internal regulations, misappropriating funds in the cash laundering operation. Your father stood there, the thick stench of cigars mixing with the musty rust of the basement. He shoved a heavy block of metal into your hands, a loaded pistol. Wipe out this bad debt. A dry administrative command. The machine demanded that you perform a data deletion operation. But at that moment, the residual resistance of old social rules made your fingers freeze. You refused to pull the trigger. No anger, only a silent shake of the head confirming a faulty product. He turned and walked out. The steel door slammed shut. The electronic lock beeped sharply. Total isolation was activated. The game had changed its frame of reference. The traitor was no longer tied. He lay sprawled on the wet cement floor, one leg broken and bent, completely misaligned with human anatomy. The pistol had been kicked across the room. It rested a meter from you, 5 meters from him. The intercom crackled, cold and sharp. Tomorrow morning shift, only one person needs to check in. All illusions of morality were instantly stripped away by the system. You were facing a binary survival problem, 0 or 1. Paranoia activated directly into the reptilian core of your nervous system. The man began to crawl toward you. The sound of his body scraping against the wet concrete floor was like sandpaper grinding against eardrums. His speed was a variable threatening the supply chain of your own survival. No retreat. You lunged across the icy floor, seizing the rough gun handle. The trigger squeezed unnaturally light. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the confined space. The biological mass stopped moving. The problem was solved. The door opened. Your father stepped in, carefully maneuvering around the corpse as if it were broken furniture. He nodded. This wasn't paternal affection, it was contract acceptance. The bloodied internship was complete. A sickly surge of basic safety coursed through your body. You had not lost your soul. You had just swiped your official employee ID. Rank 3. The right-hand enforcer. Purge phase. Your absolute silence in the basement over the corpse had paid the initiation fee. The system recorded a successful personnel transaction. The unlocked reward wasn't a privilege, it was a massive workload in the execution subsystem. You stepped over darkened streaks of dried blood, leaving the damp basement behind to enter soundproof VIP rooms with no windows. Halogen lights cast a cold glow over lists of targets, each name densely written. The purge phase had begun. The honeymoon between you and the family board was officially activated. Don't mistake the concept, there would be no sunlit family vacations in Pattaya Bay, no diplomatic golf outings in the suburbs. The only team building at this level involved auditing the loss reports of white powder shipments and optimizing the human waste disposal process. You graduated with honors from the Academy of Paperless Sentences. The system's excretions required a sharp tool. Your brain continued to perfect the mechanism of indifference. No inner struggle. No gnawing at the conscience. The first lesson you drew in your new position. Any moral conflict is a drag on productivity. You realized that maintaining credibility with the operator required more than compliance. You had to exceed ruthless KPIs. The organization didn't pay for passivity. If he issued a verbal reminder about a partner overdue on payment, you didn't send a warning letter. You coordinated a strike team, burning down the partner's entire warehouse along with the night shift security crew. If a sector showed signs of a data leak, you enforced the code of absolute silence. Anyone suspected of speaking would instantly become an anonymous entry in the ledger of the missing. You became the right hand, head of human resources and executioner, a hunting dog biologically programmed to sleep obediently at the feet of the largest shareholder. Deadly contracts became daily administrative work. Your personal perspective now revolved solely around casualty numbers and profit margins. You stared into the bathroom mirror during sleepless nights. No monster looked back at you. You saw only a machine operating at 100% efficiency. Systematized violence brought a warped kind of peace. Yet survival paranoia began knocking at the door. This organization operated on continuous culling. Hand-to-hand violence was a skill that depreciated quickly. Any mercenary on the street could pull the trigger. You knew that if you remained merely a killing machine, your usable lifespan would rapidly expire. You would become invisible once again. To preserve your position, you had to upgrade your software. You had to evolve from a physical tool into a calculating brain before the system deemed you an expired product. Rank 4. The Financial Architect Restructuring Phase. The dark stains of dried blood beneath your leather soles were finally replaced by the expensive carpet of a soundproof boardroom. Crude violence had completed its depreciation cycle. The workload increased in direct proportion to the number of erased bodies, but you identified a critical flaw in the supply chain. Physical violence had limited storage capacity. Federal investigators didn't lurk in rust-stained slums, they followed audit reports. You understood the organization's elimination process. To avoid becoming a depreciating asset awaiting liquidation, you granted yourself a functional upgrade. From an executioner carrying out orders, you restructured yourself into a financial architect. You designed a perfectly coded laundering scheme. Instead of the bulky, high-risk mattress store chains of your predecessors, you operated a network of hundreds of automated car washes running 24/7 across the territory. Observe how the machine runs. Pale fluorescent lights cast shadows over empty concrete lots at 3 a.m. Automated systems sprayed water over platforms without a single vehicle in sight. Not a single customer. Yet the coin meters kept ticking upward. Millions of dollars, crumpled cash, soaked in sweat and gunpowder, were broken down, blended into fabricated retail revenue, and flowed seamlessly through tax payment gateways. The Federal Bureau of Investigation looked at the records and saw nothing more than a dull infrastructure service business. When you slid the immaculate financial report across the mahogany table, your father didn't smile. He looked at you. For the first time, it wasn't the downward gaze of a chairman. It was the silent defensiveness of a dictator realizing a subordinate now controlled the core database. The Underworld's annual shareholders meeting took place in a windowless VIP room. You sat there, your heart rate steady at 60 beats per minute, waiting for a resolution transferring equity. You were certain your new governance algorithm would be recognized. Your father stood up. The murmurs faded. He raised a glass of red wine and began to deliver the report. His voice was calm, precise, but the keywords repeated were his own brilliance, his macro vision. The entire automated car wash network was reframed as his personal managerial innovation. Your name did not appear in the minutes. The public power structure demoted you at the table, casting you back into the role of a voiceless data processing machine. The approving laughter of subordinate dealers echoed in your ears. The only lesson extracted in that moment was utterly devoid of emotion. There was no psychological collapse, no shattered soul. Your nervous system simply logged a critical flaw in the upper structure. In the ecosystem of absolute power, the dividends of loyalty are zero. You fixed your gaze on the faint pulse of his carotid artery beneath his shirt collar. A new resolution was automatically programmed in your mind. Removing the chairman was no longer classified as patricide. It had become a mandatory corporate merger procedure. Rank 5. The Usurper King. Power seizure phase. The blood-written merger resolution, just formed in your mind, automatically grants you access to the highest security sector of the estate. You leave the suffocating VIP meeting room and walk straight down the West Wing corridor, where the oak-paneled office of the Supreme Authority resides. A hostile takeover in the underworld requires no legal filings. It is executed through the system's most critical vulnerability: biological trust. Along the corridor, elite bodyguards, living security scanners, paranoid enough to shoot their own shadows, step aside and bow. They open the door for you without requesting a weapons check. According to protocol, you are the right hand, the cache memory carrying the boss's will. They are not programmed to question the organization's source code. You push open the heavy wooden door without knocking. Inside, the air is thick with expensive cigar smoke and the biting chill of central air conditioning. He looks up from a stack of accounting reports. Perhaps he expects a retail revenue summary or a signature authorizing asset transfers. Instead, he faces the cold, black muzzle of a gun safety, already off. Review the data from years ago. The hands of the bloodied intern once trembled violently in a damp concrete basement. But now, your central nervous system registers no disruption. Your heartbeat is steady, flat, like the electrocardiogram of the dead. You look directly into the eyes of the CEO who gave you your biological code, who shaped you into an optimized instrument by ignoring you throughout your childhood. There is no dramatic dialogue, no emotion, no moral reckoning, no fracture of the soul. Every movement follows the cold administrative protocol of death. The transfer of power is complete. You step forward, pushing the body aside with the indifference of a janitor clearing an obstacle. You sit in the leather chair, still holding the residual warmth of its previous owner. Resting your shoes on the mahogany desk, you officially assume control of the empire. A new upper structure is established. But the very moment maximum control is activated, the paranoia warning system begins running automatically. You watch the blood spreading across the files. The law of power conservation in this ecosystem is clear. Loyalty does not exist. It is merely the waiting period for a higher price. The code of silence, omerta, remains effective only as long as the supply chain of fear is unbroken. Now, sitting at the top of the personnel chart, you realize there is no one left to cover your back. You no longer have a father to fear. You must face everyone standing outside that door. The cruelest punishment is not death. It is that you have just signed away your right to ever sleep peacefully again for the rest of your life. The machine has chosen you as CEO, and in that instant, you become its most perfectly confined prisoner. Rank 6. The discarded link, exile, and capture phase. The absolute silence after the usurping gunshot does not buy you an eternal throne. It only upgrades the system's surveillance to a global scale. The Drug Enforcement Administration and Europol waste no time auditing the organization's personnel ledger. Once the financial reports of the car wash network are decrypted, You are immediately reclassified from an operating CEO to a bad debt requiring urgent liquidation in the underworld. The exile phase activates automatically. You are forced to abandon the leather chair, still carrying the familiar scent of cigars, and retreat into a reinforced concrete bunker, buried deep beneath an abandoned industrial zone on the outskirts near the Tijuana border. Look at your asset statement now. Billions in cash stacked in moisture-proof aluminum cases. Crumpled US dollars, stained and worn once symbols of managerial power. But at this level, the laws of economics have shifted. Money no longer functions as a medium of exchange. It becomes biological scrap paper. You cannot even buy a cup of hot coffee at a gas station, because every security camera is flashing infrared beams, waiting to scan your face. This is the final lesson in personnel management and the only personal insight extracted from your entire career. Loyalty in a criminal organization follows the physics of liquids. When the ship begins to sink, water floods in. The elite bodyguards, the ones who once swore to take bullets for you at the banquet table, are now calmly sitting in soundproof interrogation rooms. They are trading your GPS coordinates in exchange for reduced sentences. The dry code of Omerta has officially expired. Physiological paranoia begins to erode your neurons. You haven't dared to close your eyes for 14 days. Your muscles twitch uncontrollably. Every faint scrape of gravel outside the bunker, every rhythmic knock at 3 a.m. from a leaking pipe, is instantly translated by your brain into the sound of a gun being cocked. You are imprisoned within the very defense mechanism you built. Physical exhaustion pushes the system beyond its limits. And then, the investors of justice decide to freeze your account. Dozens of bright red laser sights from tactical rifles slash across the concrete walls, locking onto the target. They shout dry administrative commands in English. But you don't reach for the pistol resting on the wooden table. Your nervous system does not respond with anger or panic. Following its emotionless protocol, it emits only one calibrated signal: release. When the cold steel cuffs snap around your wrists with a decisive click, you realize the truth. You have not lost power. You are simply handing over a failed project. Ironically, being escorted into a maximum security cell is not a punishment. It is an approval document granting you official retirement from this machine of elimination. For the first time in decades, you are allowed to close your eyes without scanning for exits. You have become a discarded link of the system, and discarded things are no longer worth hunting. The physiological release, when the steel figure-8 cuffs snapped onto your wrists, bought you one final storage space: a 2x3-meter solitary confinement cell in a remote, maximum security facility. No more scanning lasers, no more screaming money counters. The silence here is an administrative procedure approved by the state. You share this ecosystem with an anonymous entity, a thin young man whose daily routine consists only of turning thin pages and remaining silent. On the 400th night shift, your breathing cycle is abruptly interrupted. Rough hands clamp tightly around your throat. The flow of oxygen is cut off. A whispered message is delivered close to your ear, carrying the sour stench of sweat. My father was your 15th birthday project. Your reptilian nervous system automatically calculates counterforce. As a fully optimized physical data processing machine, you could snap his joints in exactly 0.5 seconds. But the beam of light from the hallway sweeps across his pupils, forcing you to halt. There is no personal hatred, no moral injury. You are simply looking at a backup copy of yourself, extracted from that night in the damp concrete basement long ago. The underworld's final management lesson resolves cleanly. The machine always has a self-cleansing mechanism. You suddenly understand your father's handover record. He didn't lose that hostile takeover. He simply approved his own termination order to escape the suffocating paranoia of survival. Your personal perspective at this moment? Any attempt to resist the system is wasted energy. You deactivate your defense mechanism. Every muscle relaxes. You refuse to issue a counterattack command. Your personnel report is now officially closed, clean, final, completely devoid of emotion. The entity, before you completes his quota for the night. The administrative loop has finished its depreciation cycle on you, but it has just successfully initialized the source code for the one pulling the trigger at the other end. This file is closed. From your analytical perspective, who will be the next cog chosen by the machine to become CEO? Subscribe to gain continued access to the Underworld's archived projects in the next dossiers.